Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm Ben. I come from a broken family, one that's left its mark on me in more ways than I'd like to admit. My mother was a domineering presence, and she had her flying monkey sisters, Vanessa, the oldest, 13 years older than me, and Laura, 10 years older. I was, by all accounts, an accident, a mistake they blamed for tearing my parents apart. My dad left us in 1977, when I was just 5, and he never came back. Growing up, I faced bullying on two fronts, at school and right in my own home, the one place I should have felt safe. I craved a bit of warmth from my mother, a simple pat on the back, some acknowledgement that I mattered, that I belonged. But that never happened. I eventually turned to my studies, something I could control. After 12 years of trying to fit in, I decided to dedicate myself to school, pouring all my energy there. It became my escape, my focus, my way of moving forward. Years went by, and by 1993, I was finally away from home, studying at Kingston University in South London. It was a relief, an escape from the life I'd known. There, I met Kathy. Even now, I can picture her from those days, beautiful and confident, a world apart from me. She was finishing her creative writing degree, and I was in my last year of my master's in mechanical engineering and design. I was too shy to even think about approaching her. She was never short of attention, anyway. She was 5 feet 5 inches, with warm brown hair and those deep brown eyes you could lose yourself in. She had a great figure, too, but I knew she was out of my league. The guys who hung around her were the outgoing, popular types, so unlike me. To my surprise, one of her friends got talking to me at a party and Kathy came over and joined us. I had little experience of women, and I think being humble and bashful made me attractive to her. I managed to build up the courage to ask her out and began dating. I am not ashamed to say that she took my virginity, but after around 6 months of dating, I heard a rumor that she had been screwing around with other guys. I had no way to prove it and was afraid to confront her. Kathy was a spoiled child. Her parents spoiled her and her sister Martha, and most of our relationship, I had to put up with her acting like a princess. If she did not get her own way, she would create a fuss, and she wouldn't hesitate in creating problems in public, which just caused me embarrassment. My friends couldn't stand her and thought I should get rid of her, but I fell in love, and I had never really experienced that before. When we graduated, we both found jobs and managed to find a flat outside of Southampton in Hampshire. Her family were from there, and I had long since stopped having anything to do with mine. We were married a year later, and the following year we welcomed Sophie to the world, shortly followed by Ava a couple of years later. Kathy loved being a mother, and everything between us seemed to be great from then on. I got promoted a few times, and then 10 years ago I started working for Cooper Engineering. The increased salary and bonuses helped us to save for a better house, but like most people in the world, 2008 was a bad year. The economic downturn meant that many people lost their jobs. Contracts were harder to win, so we all had to up our game and work longer hours for no extra money. It was at this time, when both the girls were full-time at school, that I realized Kathy was having an affair with some guy from our old university. I was so focused on work that by the time it ended I was none the wiser who he was. My best friend Noah thought it was a guy in her class that had moved nearby. I confronted her once about it, and she just laughed in my face and told me to stop being stupid, but I could tell she was lying. The fact I was able to keep my job and the good salary meant I was in a great position to buy a nice house. Kathy was always on at me to own a house that befitted our status, whatever that meant, but I conceded, as I always did, and we managed to buy a beautiful detached 5-bed house in Southampton. It was a buyer's market at the time, so we got a good price even though the mortgage was a little steep. One thing I did do that was out of character was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only put my end-of-year bonus in it, and with me being the sole breadwinner and the one responsible for all the finances and banking, I don't think Kathy would have known about it even if I waved the receipts under her nose. In retrospect, this turned out to be one of the best things I could have done. I needed some protection because I was not sure if Kathy planned on dumping me if the old lover ever returned. After that time, everything seemed to go back to a semblance of normality, and the girls were always a top priority for me. I encouraged them in education and made sure I spent plenty of time with them at weekends. In fact, it was me who took them to dance classes, concerts, and to the zoo on more occasions than I can remember. Kathy always seemed too busy on her coffee outings with her other spoilt and lazy friends. I rarely socialized with the other husbands, but we all seemed to be henpecked and under the thumb to varying degrees. My friends used to sing "Under My Thumb" by the Rolling Stones to me when I had to cancel plans in favor of whatever Kathy wanted to do. Even at work, the guys on the factory floor would make comments about my marital situation, especially Kathy's control over me. It was only a few months ago that it all came to a head. Ava had just left for university, and for the first time in 18 years, Kathy and I were alone. Both the girls were attending our old alma mater, and as I finished unpacking Ava's belongings into the apartment she would be sharing with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was even with their mother. I was gobsmacked as she was always such a quiet girl like her old dad. Dad, I heard she's screwing around with Simon Cooper at your company, Ava said. I can remember the tears in her eyes even now as she spoke. It was news to me, but I was not surprised. All these years I could have investigated her affairs and never did for fear of breaking up the family and my girls suffering for it and resenting me like my sisters did my dad. I allowed her to cuck me because the alternative did not bear thinking about. I still loved her, but I loved what we had created even more. This news did a number of things to me. Firstly, I realized for the first time the level of animosity felt by my girls towards their mother was far greater than I could ever have imagined. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed I hadn't taken a tougher stance with Kathy. Secondly, it brought up old feelings I felt towards the women in my life whilst growing up and how that contributed to my weaknesses. Finally, I realized at work I was being talked about and laughed at openly by the staff, and most noticeably by Simon Cooper, who just happened to be the nephew of the owner Ethan and the man cucking me. I did not know what to do, but I knew I couldn't go on allowing this, especially now my youngest daughter was aware of the ridicule I was receiving at the hands of Kathy. I knew I had to confront her. My heart was racing as I was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for Kathy to return home. When she finally appeared, I found I was unable to speak again. She just looked at me in a way I can only describe as apathy and with contempt. She said nothing to me as she emptied her bags into the cupboards. Finally, I spoke. "Are you having an affair, Kathy?" She turned to face me, slightly blushing, but with no hesitation she replied, "I wouldn't call it an affair, darling." I was shocked and sickened by her admission, and yet waited silently in anticipation of her explanation of how screwing another man was not classed as an affair. "You are a wonderful man, Ben. You're a great provider, and you're my best friend, but there are things you can't provide me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want it all," she said bluntly and openly. "So that means you're cheating on me," I said, dismayed by her brazen approach to infidelity. "Only my body," she said, "not my heart or my mind, Ben, that belongs to you." My head was spinning, and my stomach was in knots. The sheer unabashed cheek of what she was saying left me speechless. "I never deny you sex, Ben, and all I'm doing is exploring with a couple of younger guys," she admitted. "What?" I screamed. I never raised my voice, and my reaction took her aback. She walked around the table and took a seat opposite me. "Don't shout at me, Ben," she said, regaining her composure. "You admit to cheating on me with 2 guys, and I'm supposed to be quiet," I replied. "I love you, Ben, but this is how things are going to be. Live with it, or I'll leave and be with him anyway," she said, issuing me both a threat and an ultimatum. I just sat looking at her when her face softened. I thought for a minute she had seen the hurt in my face. "Everyone does it these days, Ben. My friends have had flings with younger men, and they say it makes the marriage better," she said. I was in shock. I was struggling to absorb it all before, but now Kathy was actually trying to justify her adultery by telling me all her friends were cheats too. As for the notion that it would make our marriage better was contemptuous at best. She did not care for the marriage or me, only the comfort and security I could provide. I spoke again. "So, I can have another woman? Is that what you're saying, Kathy?" She looked at me for a few seconds and then laughed in my face. I sat in silence as she continued to laugh before trying to control herself. "Yeah, right, Ben. Come on, be serious. You struggle to speak to women you have known for years. What chance are you going to have to chat someone else up?" She was openly mockingly me whilst continuing to giggle, and I felt embarrassed and ashamed, but she refused to let up. "This is how it's going to be, Ben, so don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife. I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Do not mess up your life by complaining about it or doing something you'll regret." She left me at the table contemplating what had just happened to my life, to my world. She was so open about her activities that I realized she did not care for me one little bit. I did not care if her friends were all cheating 304s, but that did not give her the right to be one. Not only that, but she actually had the audacity to threaten me. I was angry, very angry. That night I slept in the spare room. I couldn't face being anywhere near her, but around midnight Kathy woke me up and asked me why I wasn't coming to bed. Was she really this deluded? I knew she was a spoilt bitch, but really? "Oh, come on, Ben. Get with it. This is the way the world works now. You're just acting like an old man," she said. I said nothing. I could sense her presence still on the landing looking into the spare room. "Oh, suit yourself, Ben. You'll come back to bed soon, I know. You deny me nothing, and you know as well as I do. I'll get my own way," she said confidently. In reality, she was right. What had I ever done in a 22-year relationship that suggested anything other than my unbridled loyalty and willingness to go along with everything she said and wanted? It was public knowledge that I was under her thumb and henpecked, and now it was well known amongst her friends and my work colleagues that I was a cuck too. Next morning, I went to my office. It took just a few steps in and was greeted by Simon Cooper, the man my wife is screwing. He smiled at me and asked, "How's your wife been? Hope she is good." The smug look on his face, as though he was about to burst into laughter at any minute, just made my blood boil. I just looked at him and said nothing. I heard a few giggles by the coffee machine from grown men. I just looked at them as they stood their ground. I made my way past them as they continued to chuckle at my expense. I felt like the whole world knew my business, and even the boss's secretary Chloe seemed to find my situation laughable and open to mockery. I walked into my office and sat at my desk. My day had started off in the worst possible way, and now I was a laughingstock at work as well as home. I tried my best to focus on my project, but the anger within me refused to abate. I decided to start looking into my father. All I knew was that he was born in Cambridgeshire and left us at the age of 38 in 1977, so I searched for family history sites in that area. Within a few minutes, I discovered that there were 14 people named James Collins in Cambridgeshire who were born in 1939. I knew he might have died years before I went to university, so I was able to narrow it down to 3 possible people. I decided I did not have the time to go searching for each one, so I placed a message on genealogy websites in each of the towns I had found. As I sat in my office thinking about the last 24 hours, I was called by my boss Ethan. He wanted to speak to me in his office. Now Ethan was a successful and wealthy man, but at 60 he had been married 3 times. He was a cheater and a bully. He is one of those power-mad types who commands respect but gives none in return. Many times, in the past I had thought about quitting, but he always convinced me to stay, and the money was the best in this area. One thing I did know about him was that he was screwing his secretary Chloe behind his 3rd wife's back. "Now I hear these rumors about your wife playing around on you, Ben," he said bluntly. "With your nephew?" I snapped back. "Well, yes, he's a cad, that boy. It runs in the family," he said, laughing as I remained silent. "But that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first after that, Ben. So, if you've a problem, it will be you who'll have to leave the company. Is that understood?" He was talking to me like an old-school teacher punishing a child. I bit my lip as his eager secretary Chloe hovered by the door. She was no doubt collecting some information to spread to her friends on the factory floor. As I turned to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would lower herself to the depths of having sex with a dirty old man like Ethan Cooper. As I passed her, I heard snickering again. I put my head down and walked out. As the door closed behind me, I heard the explosive sound of laughter, which was obviously at my expense. I made my way back to my office. I realized that being here was doing me no good at all. I had paid for my girl's education, and all I was doing now was financing my wife's infidelities. I was a pretty simple guy. I liked my gadgets, but I could live without the big house. The majority of my living costs were Kathy's indulgences, weekly hair and nail appointments, her car and phone, plus other unnecessary luxuries. At work I was normally happy. It was my place to be creative, and I was very successful. I was the one who had designed many of the parts being produced and sold here, and I was sure I could find gainful employment elsewhere. They just thought I was too weak, and well, they were right. I wasn't the confrontational type, and I never made waves because I was content. I was good old Ben, the submissive engineer who people could walk all over. I looked at my screensaver of the family on holiday. I rolled the mouse and the page opened to my email. I had a message waiting for me, and it was from a woman called Amanda Foster from the Cambridge Genealogy Committee. I was taken aback by how fast they had replied. I clicked and read the message. I was blown away. Amanda had read my message appealing for information on my dad, and had gotten in touch with a woman who claimed to be his niece. Her name was Claire Davis, and she was my cousin. I mailed back my number to Amanda and asked if Claire could possibly contact me. I left work with my spirits slightly raised. When I reached home, Kathy was cooking dinner, and as I walked in, she smiled and came up to me. I moved away and in a few minutes came back for dinner. "Can we talk about last night, Ben?" she asked meekly. "What's there to talk about? You made yourself perfectly clear last night. I either live with it or else, right?" She looked at me for a few seconds with what looked like regret in her face. It did not last for long as she inhaled deeply, cleared her throat, and continued, "You're a great husband, and you've denied me nothing, so please don't deny me this, Ben." She was almost pleading. "If I'm so great, why cheat on me? Why make a fool of me?" I asked honestly. She became flustered and just shrugged me off. She had no answer. She was just selfish, and I was growing tired of it. I couldn't do any more to make her happy. The hours I put in to pay the bills and give her everything she wants, and I get nothing but disrespect and ridicule. I drive a 12-year-old Range Rover so she can drive one less than 2 years old. Look, Ben, I have needs, and you just cannot fulfill them. So you either deal with it like I know you're going to, or you lose me to a younger man. You mean Simon Cooper. You might as well use his name, Kathy. Everyone knows he's screwing you, I interjected. Okay, yes, Simon and I are lovers. He is effectively your boss, Ben, and he'll one day take over the company from his uncle, she said bluntly. So, he gives me what I need now in bed, and if you do not buck up and accept the arrangement, then I'll leave you, and he'll give me everything else I want and need. I said nothing as usual. I just got up from my seat and walked into my study. The tears came, and I wished to be anywhere else but here right now. I found a tissue and wiped my eyes as the phone began to ring. I picked it up the phone and heard a strange voice on the other end. It was Claire. We spoke for about an hour, and when I put the phone down, everything else was gone from my mind, and I had a huge smile on my face. Claire was delighted that I had decided to look into my father and had so much to tell me. I found out that my mum had indeed kicked my father out of the house, so she lied to me all my childhood. He sadly died in 1983 when I was just 11. He had died of alcohol poisoning, and his mother, my grandmother, always blamed my mum for his character and state of mind after he left us. Claire told me he longed to be back in my life, but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet at the weekend at her home in Cambridge. I was excited, and I knew the break would do me good. The rest of the week dragged on. Things at home were the same, and at work I was being constantly laughed at behind my back. Simon and his pals thought it would be funny to hang a pair of knickers on my office door. I looked at Chloe and she said nothing. Inside the underwear was a post-it note that said, "Please return to your wife, I was broken." I sat at my desk and cried that day too. I wanted to blame everyone except myself. I would be glad when Saturday arrived. I told Kathy I was going to see a friend in London, and she didn't really care what I was up to. I guess she would be screwing around on me, so being away made that easier for her. The drive up to Cambridge was stressful. I eventually found Claire's house an hour after I was expected. It did not seem to bother her, as I was greeted with the best hug I had received in years. I was introduced to her husband Greg and their 2 young children, Grace and William. With the formalities over with, we got down to talk about my father and my new family. Claire had such a warm, selfless personality, and she and Greg talked over each other and finished each other's sentences. I guess they were both eager to share the story of our family. During my time there, we were joined by Mark and Hannah Collins. He was my cousin also and brother of Claire. We got on really well, and he added what he knew about my father and the family. After lunch we went on a little trip where I was given time to think. When we returned, Mark and I spoke about our jobs and our family life. He could tell things were not good, and for some reason I confided in both my new cousins. They simply told me not to stand for it, and that they would support me if I needed anything. I was so grateful. I left Cambridge with a new look on things. I had been told so many lies and had been treated so badly throughout my life that knowing I had a whole different family who within a day had shown me more kindness and honesty than most people I had known all my life gave me hope. I needed to sort my life out and get back to being happy. Not just for me, but for my girls, my friends, and my new family. When I returned home, it was gone 8 p.m., and Kathy was just getting ready to go out somewhere. "Where are you going, Kathy?" I asked. "Out with my friends." "Do you mean Simon or Max?" I snapped back. She looked at me, somewhat taken aback at how I knew the name of her second paramour. I gave her a knowing look. "Please, not all this again, Ben," she begged, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. "Please, Kathy, I'm asking you to stop this and be my wife. Stop being silly, Ben. I am your wife and always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures, and I'll make life easy on you. I'll be back by midnight." She had completely ignored my wishes and continued to threaten me. She walked towards me with her arms open wide, so I turned my back on her. She said nothing of my blatant snub and just collected her Prada handbag and headed for the door. "Again, Kathy, as your husband, I'm asking you not to do this," my voice now getting sterner. She stopped in her tracks and looked at me as though asking herself, who was this guy, and who does he think he is talking to me like that? It lasted only a second again before she burst out laughing. "What are you going to do, Ben? Leave me? You'll never have the balls to do that. We both know you'll always be here for me." I was crestfallen. I dropped my head as her words reverberated through my head. For me, no balls. Deny me my pleasures. I always knew she was a spoilt brat. Her parents had seen to that. I knew I treated her like a queen, whereas I was the workhorse. I knew she was selfish, but always believed she loved me more than anything. I knew I was a fool, and I knew I had been for way too long. That had to end, and I needed to make plans to make it so. I wasted no time in getting things rolling. In fact, I started while she was out getting screwed by Simon or Max. Maybe they were doing her together. That is probably what she meant by getting her pleasures, having her cake and eating it. I provide all the safety, security, and material goods, and two young a-holes get to screw her any way they wanted to. My thoughts were making me angry, and I was beginning to lose focus. I needed to find a way to destroy the last vestiges of affection I had left for her, and I think I found a way. I found the box I was looking for and the specific picture within that box. It was the only one I had of my mom and sisters. I did not think it would work, but I cut a picture I had of Kathy's face and pasted it next to them. I had no love left for them, and adding Kathy's smirking face to the picture might just do the trick. I placed it on the desk next to the monitor in my study. At around 12:45 a.m., I was finishing up. I had pretty much worked out what I was going to do in the short term. I had an idea of when I would leave, but it could be a few weeks yet. I had the time because it was not like Kathy was expecting me to go. It might not work, and I would definitely require help to pull it off, but I had convinced myself by this time that I would go through with it. I heard someone stumbling through the door, and as I got up to look out of the window, I saw Simon Cooper's car pull away. I heard her climb the stairs, so I quickly wiped my history. In future, I would have to use incognito mode. I waited until she went into our bedroom before going down the stairs to make myself a coffee. I sat on the sofa and pondered my future away from here, and to be honest, without my daughters being here, I knew it wouldn't be too bad. I thought I would try and move closer to them. Monday morning, and I walked into work clear that I would not be lifting a finger anymore. Ethan Cooper could sack me for all I care. I walked to my office oblivious to any of the snickering or comments being made about me. I managed to arrange a meeting with the bank for 1 p.m. and took the time before to work out my finances in preparation. It was going to be a long shot, but if it worked, and the right people helped me, then I would come out of this pretty unscathed. The meeting went as planned, and I was able to close out my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. I had an ISA with a few grand in it, so I closed that out for cash and stuffed it in my wallet. On the way back to the office, I stopped at a PC World and purchased 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 gigabytes USB 3.0 tough drive, and a new PC hard drive. Once back in the office, I sat down and started to see if I could open up the company's private customer files. I had seen them briefly before in Ethan's office, so I knew they existed, but I needed his password. It took me no more than an hour to crack it. Ironically, his wife's name was the username, and the password was both his name and his 6-digit birthday, Ethan240656. I had what I needed. I attached the drive to my computer and downloaded all the files to it. 10 minutes later, I did the same with all my new plans and drawings for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system I had been working on, which would keep this company ahead of the game. We built pumps for air conditioning units, heavy machinery, and even for the dairy sector. I wiped my entire PC history, including all the plans and all my work. I then shut it down and removed the hard drive and replaced it with the new one. I put everything into my bag and then reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day looking up our competitors on my phone. I checked into Monster to look for engineering jobs in the South London Surrey area and then left for the day. That night, after another silent dinner, I headed for my study. I found that one of our main competitors who had struggled during the financial downturn was looking for a mechanical engineer who could assist in basic design and shop floor management. It wasn't entirely what I wanted, but damn near close. They were offering a salary £10,000 lower than my current salary, so I fired off an email and included my CV. I decided to sleep in our marital bed that night just to keep up appearances with Kathy. However, I made sure I was asleep when she walked in. I felt her rub up against me, and I felt sick, and as bad as that was, it actually pleased me to react in such a way. I was becoming repulsed by her, and this would help me in the long run. The following day, I received a call from a very surprised-sounding Robert Williams from Sutton Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and he couldn't believe I would consider quitting Cooper Engineering for his smaller company. He near-on offered me the job on the spot, but I insisted on an interview the next day. He agreed. Another vital cog had been fitted, and the wheels were beginning to turn pretty fast. I had plenty of time on my hands, so I started to research flats in the area. I found one. It was situated 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged for a viewing the next day, after the interview with Robert Williams was finished. Next, I spoke to Ethan and told him I had to go and see my daughters at Kingston the next day to sign some papers. He just brushed me off and said go. That night, I called my best friend Noah Jones. We had known each other since 6th form. We both got in at Kingston, but he studied finance and mathematics. He was now a big-time banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife Megan and children in a nice house in Twickenham. Best of all, he and his wife loathed Kathy, which meant we rarely socialized with each other as couples. I arranged to meet Noah the next evening after my interview and flat viewing. He knew I had something playing on mind, but I told him I would tell all when we met. Before meeting Noah, I met my daughters and told them of the situation. To my surprise, they both were happy and displayed their frustration at their mother's behavior and pledged their faith and support in me. A day later, I met Noah and Megan. I told them everything that had been going on in the first part of my plans. They were more surprised that I was fighting back than by Kathy's infidelity. To them, that was pretty much par for the course in their eyes. So why leave her now, Ben? Megan asked, handing me another cup of tea. I told them all about the meeting with my cousins and the truth about my dad being kicked out of the house by my mom and how my sisters took her side. My dad was just like me, or shall I say I was like him? But this time my girls are on my side. So it was that discovery that triggered you into finally standing up for yourself? Noah asked, concern etched on his face. No. I was taken to my father's grave. I was hesitant at first, but I managed to lay some flowers and say a few words. It was then I looked at the etching on the stone that left me shocked. It was then I knew I had to leave, I explained. What was it, Ben? They said in unison. It had an image of a rose, and below that it said in loving memory. It had the date of his birth, and below that it said the age he was when he died. There was a period of silence before I spoke again. He died at the age of 44. The age I am now. Both Noah and Megan recoiled slightly at this news, and I knew then they understood. There have been times when I could have reached for the drink like he did, or did myself and like my grandmother believed he did. I had a choice, be like him or fight back. I said clearly. I decided I wasn't going to kill myself trying to be the perfect husband anymore and being abused and ridiculed in the process. I felt weaker at that point than I had in weeks. Admitting to my friends how low I had been was harder than I imagined. Noah shook me out of my mood. What do you need from us, Ben? Please say no if it's too much, but I have a plan to protect myself and… Screw the bitch over? Megan interjected. I smiled and nodded. I guess Megan did have a tough side to her character. When I thought she was having an affair in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and any spare cash into it. It was also with a stroke of luck that the only way we could get a mortgage for the amount we needed was if I applied in my name only. Kathy had no real work history, so it was just easier for me to apply alone. I knew if anyone was capable of following my train of thought, it would be Noah. I asked Noah to transfer the ownership of my house to a new company that he would create. I pay off the mortgage. All I need to do is contact the land registry and transfer the deeds into his company. Noah was skeptical. I told him that Kathy will have no money to fight the case, and her parents will not support her if they find out that she is sleeping around. They are religious and value their ethics more than their daughter. They agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage and stated that I can pay later. On my way home, I went to the local Land Rover dealership. I knew the guy because it is where I purchased Kathy's Range Rover Sport about 10 months ago. I was still paying for it, in fact. I had an idea of how to get some more money. I told him that I want to exchange Kathy's car for the latest model. We came to an agreement that he would take the Range Rover back and we would cancel our payment plan. I promised to return to upgrade my car, and he knew he could make up the cost of Kathy's car by selling it as practically brand new. I apologized for any inconvenience, but the thought of selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than made it up to him. On the way out, I took a 2016 brochure, not for me, but for Kathy. When I got home, Kathy was sat in the lounge nursing a coffee and looking a bit pale. I took off my Ethernet and threw my bag down onto the floor. I had to now work on second part of the plan. I told Kathy that I still love her and I want my wife to have the best of everything, so I'm going to trade her car in and buy her this, I said, pointing to a new 2017 model inside the brochure. Oh wow, I love it, she said, oblivious to my plan. You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Ben? The only problem is that they have a buyer for your car already, so I need to get it down there by Friday afternoon. I'll finish work early and take it to the dealership, and then for the weekend you can just use mine to go visit your lovers. The final comment made her recoil, and a look of shock and confusion filled her face. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, Ben. I just thought you were still angry about our arrangement, she asked. Not our arrangement, Kathy. Your arrangement. I had no say in it, remember. But I guess I have no choice, right? I said, hoping to get a response. She just nodded as though she had finally put me in my place, and I had conceded defeat. I love you, Ben. I turned to look at her, and a genuine look of concern greeted me. I said nothing in reply, and just walked off into the kitchen. My phone began to ring, and I walked out to the back garden to take it. Noah confirmed the money had been transferred. I was good to go. The next day, I wasted no time as I entered the bank and was shown into the mortgage specialist's office. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off. All my remaining accounts were closed. I walked a few doors down and opened a new account with another bank. I was a happy man knowing that I wouldn't have to pay anything again. unless Kathy got a solicitor and took me to court. My smile faded. Next day, I contacted the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application. I had all the details of Noah and Megan's new company, and within 10 minutes of applying, I was sent a confirmation email telling me it would take 3 to 5 days to complete. Once this was done, I would simply hand over the deeds to Noah, and he could register the property to his company. That same day, I knocked on Ethan's door. Chloe was in there with him, of course. Fridays were usually the day the dirty old a-hole had his way with her, and I think I disturbed their amorous activities. She left us alone. I placed my resignation down on his desk. He looked up at me with that stupid smirk on his face. "What's this?" he asked. "My resignation." I replied, "I think it's best if I leave straight away. I'm sure with the situation regarding our families, I doubt you want me here too long." He looked dumbstruck. "I'd be grateful if you can get my P45 ready by Monday, and please don't mention this to anyone. The wife doesn't know," I said brashly. "You can't do this, we need you," he said pathetically. "Not as much as you need your nephew, apparently. I'll be in on Monday to collect the last of my things." I pretended to drop a pin from my pocket, and when I bent down, I removed the digital recorder from my sock. I had managed to construct a pin to it, and as I stood back up, I hit record and pushed it up under the seat and into the wooden frame. "If that's all, Ethan, I have things to do." "Okay, Ben, but don't come crawling back when you're skint. Your money is the only thing keeping that cheating wife at yours with you. Do you realize that?" "Of course I know that, Ethan. I wish my wife was as loyal your wife is," I said, smiling. I knew that one hit him where it hurt. I turned and left his office. An hour later, I drove home and picked up Kathy's car and logbook. I drove to the dealership and dropped off her car. Thankfully, John Reeves offered to drive me home. I gladly accepted. When I got home that night, Kathy was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she had been crying. I asked her what happened. She reluctantly told me that she got gonorrhea. I laughed. Shit, did I laugh, and she just glared at me. "Well, just take the drugs and soon enough you will be back on your back." Oops, I mean feet. If looks could kill, I would dead already. I slept well that night for the first time in months. Of course, I slept in the spare room. Saturday morning, and I was feeling great. The good night's sleep definitely helped me, and I went into our bedroom and woke Kathy in bed to tell her I was going to give her some space to rest and recover. "You think I'm disgusting, don't you?" she said. I said nothing, and suddenly the tears began to flow down her cheeks. "I just want you to get better, that's all." "Oh, Ben, I do love you so much. I think I've messed up big time." I told Lauren about my problem, and she sounded horrified. At first, I felt bad for her, but it disappeared even quicker than I thought it would. That shocked me a little. I realized then I had lost all love for the woman I have been married to for 21 years. Could it really disappear that quickly? Obviously, it could, because I was done, and her situation did nothing to slow me down. I left the room after saying nothing. I got into my car and drove away happily. That night I stayed with Noah and Megan, who threw a dinner party with many of their friends and colleagues in attendance. When I arrived home late Sunday morning, I found Kathy up doing housework. I walked into the lounge, and when she saw me, she launched herself at me and hugged me. I just patted her on the back. She asked, "When will her new car arrive?" "I can drop you off in town to meet your sister, and then you can ask her to drive you to the dealership. Then you get to drive back your new Range Rover," I said with an excited grin. She smiled and walked towards me with her arms open. I turned back to the kettle, pretending I didn't see her. For the rest of the day, Kathy was all around me, and I actually felt uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I kept making excuses to leave. I think she got the message, because as I went to bed, I could see that she had been crying again. "Good night, Kathy. Will you be sleeping with me tonight, Ben? I want to cuddle up to you, and I want you to tell me everything will be okay." I felt nothing. "Not until you get the all clear from the doctor, Kathy." "Sorry, but you made your bed," I said harshly. "Well, when I get better, I'm sure I can find a man who'll want to be in bed with me. I have plenty of lost time to make up for," she snapped back bitterly. I laughed to myself. It took longer than I expected, but here it was, and the bitch was back. All those regrets from Friday night had disappeared. For the last 21 years, I would have fallen for her bullshit, but this time I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. The last night in my house, and it will be in the spare room. I was also glad that she said those things. It removed any sign of any doubt I might have had. I looked at my mocked-up picture of her and my sisters, and all I could feel was hatred for her. She was only sweet when she wanted something and a bitch when she couldn't get it. I woke early Monday morning. Kathy was awake early too for her 8:30 hair appointment, so I drove her into town as planned. I drove off knowing that could be the last time I ever see her. I somehow feared it wouldn't be, but it would for as long as I could make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and terminated both our contracts. I pulled over into a lobby to pay the penalty on my card. They informed me that the phones would remain in service until 5 p.m. Perfect. Next, I headed for the office to pick up my P45. I entered the factory, and there was a solemn atmosphere. News of my departure must have made the rounds, and for a brief moment, I saw a look of fear on their faces. I did not know why. As I walked down the corridor towards my office, I passed the coffee machine where the usual suspects were gathered. I wasn't exactly sure if Max and Simon were aware that they were both screwing my wife or not. But here they were both grinning at me and sharing jokes with the other morons. "Morning, guys," I said gleefully. "Good morning, Ben. How's the wife?" They said to the usual laughter. How this joke was still funny was beyond me. "Oh, not so good, I'm afraid," I replied. "One of you bozos gave her the clap." I walked away to complete silence, and when I turned back their jaws had dropped and Max then yelled something at Simon. I heard a big commotion before heading up the stairs. Chloe saw me approaching and gave me a half smile before putting her head down. Maybe now I was getting some respect. Ethan was soon at the door before I could knock. "I have what you want, so take it and get out." Maybe that respect thing was in my imagination. I entered his office and sat down. I reached under the chair and surreptitiously put the recorder into my pocket. I knew he would have given Chloe his weekly Friday stuffing, and now I had it all on the recorder. "So do you have another job lined up, Ben?" he snapped. I ignored him at first, but thought I will give him what he wants. "No, nothing," I said. A big smile grew on his face, and he probably thought I would come crawling back to him soon enough. "So, do I get my final month's pay and end-of-year bonus now, Ethan?" I asked. He burst out laughing as Chloe walked in with my P45. "What's so funny?" she asked. "Ben here just asked for his bonus and pay." "That's hilarious," Chloe said, joining him laughing at me. I thought why not, so I joined in too. This made them stop and look at me like I had gone mad. "Why are you laughing, Ben?" Chloe said. "I don't know, Chloe. Why do you let this old maggot screw you every week?" I said as my laughter grew louder. They froze as her eyes grew wide and Ethan began to turn red with anger. I bet Mummy and Daddy are proud of their slutty little daughter. She dropped my paperwork on the floor and ran out of the room in tears. "You a hole," Ethan said. "Get out of my office and out of my company before I get the boys to drag you out by your ears." I laughed as I walked out and into my office to collect the last of my things. I was still laughing to myself as I pulled up to my house. I got out and dropped the back seats. I opened the boot and went inside the house. I walked around the house thinking about what I wanted to take with me. I had a few Romero Brito artworks and so took them down and wrapped them in some plastic I'd found in the garage. I packed them into my car and continued around the house collecting things. Finally, I went upstairs and emptied my wardrobe. I took all my paperwork from the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and my wedding certificate. I found a loft ladder and went up and found all my old stuff. My degree and the family photos were all up there. I went into the master and took all the jewelry I had brought Kathy over the years. It must have been over £10,000 worth, and then I took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I had brought too. In fact, the whole damn wardrobe was purchased by me, so I took the lot. I was always the responsible one, so I had receipts for nearly everything for insurance purposes. It would serve me well when I come to sell it all. When I was done packing, I realized I would need a TV, so I took that too, along with my movie collection and the Blu-ray player, of course. By now my car was way too full. I thought I could lose all of Kathy's clothes and a few more items I really didn't need, including some of my old clothes. A new me would require a new wardrobe, and the girls would jump at the chance to help me out with that. I found all the best pictures of me and the girls and packed them into the car. I was in no real rush because Kathy wasn't going to be back until gone 2 p.m. I made a cup of tea and took 5 minutes. Well, you have to have a cup of tea. It's in the Magna Carta, I think. I picked up my phone and called the TV company and canceled the satellite, phone, and internet. I called British Gas and Southern Water to cancel the utilities. It would take a few days, but I did not care. I returned to the bedroom and sat on the bed when I noticed something that gave me an idea, one that scared even me. It was sat at the top of the wardrobe in a dusty old box. It was Kathy's wedding dress. She loved it probably more than me. I took it down and then found amongst the box of photographs on the bed our wedding album. I grabbed the duvet cover and snatched everything up and headed towards the garden. When I was outside, I walked to the middle of the garden and dumped everything into a pile. I added all of Kathy's clothes and her belongings that I knew I couldn't sell. I made sure I left her underwear alone because, well, I did not want to catch anything. I went to my car and closed all the doors up. I was ready to go, and looking at my watch, it was only 1:45 p.m., so I called up Robert Williams and told him I could drop off my P45 later that night with the night shift. That way I could start work afresh tomorrow morning. He sounded delighted, and I told him I was already working on plans to win him new customers and improve the hydraulic pumps that would make him super competitive in the market. I think he could feel my enthusiasm, and I hoped as I ended the call that I had made his day. It was now 2 p.m., and I sat waiting for the call. I found some paint thinners in the garage and walked out into the garden and poured it all over the wedding dress. I was about to light the fire when my phone rang. "Hello," I said calmly. "What is going on, Ben?" Kathy screamed down the phone. "Whatever do you mean, Kathy?" I asked sarcastically. "Don't play dumb, Ben," she continued. "Calm down, Kathy. What's going on?" There was silence, and I could hear her breathing heavily. I could also hear what sounded like her sister in the background. "They told me you have not brought me a new car but sold mine instead." "Oh yes, did I forget to tell you that?" I said. "What are you talking about, Ben? What's going on?" She started to sound panicked. "Well, from now on, if you want a car, you can pay for it yourself," I said, trying to remain as calm as I could. My heart was racing. "What?" she yelled. I don't understand, Ben," she said meekly and sounding very confused. "You heard me just fine, Kathy. You want it, you can buy it. Now if you will excuse me, I need to tidy up the kitchen." "Is this some kind of sick joke?" I said nothing. "We will talk about this when I get home, Ben." "I'm not happy about being pranked," she screamed. Again I remained silent. I could hear her out of breath as though she was walking at pace to her sister's car. The slamming door confirmed it. I knew she was on her way. In her state, she could convince her sister to be here in 5 minutes. Ben. "Yes," I replied almost too calmly. "Did you say you were in our kitchen?" she asked, suddenly realizing what I had said. "Yes." "Why are you not at work?" she asked. I said nothing. Ben. She was now breathless, and I could hear the panic and confusion in her voice. I put the phone down as she continued screaming my name. I walked outside, struck a match, and lit the pyre. Our past went up in flames as I walked away. I took our marriage certificate from my pocket and tore it into pieces and left it on the kitchen table, along with a single photograph of us all on holiday in Disneyland. It was a great time with many happy memories. I wonder if she thought so too. I got into my car and drove away. As I got to the end of the street, I could see in my rearview mirror Kathy and Amanda pulling up to the house. Neither of them looked up, they just ran into the house. I switched my phone off, smiled, and pulled away. I was in Sutton by 4 p.m. and decided I had time to visit a local phone shop and set up a new mobile phone contract. I also managed to catch the administration team at work to process my P45, and I met Freya, my new secretary. She was pretty young but held herself very professionally, a complete contrast to Chloe. I made my way back to my new flat, which was completely empty. I had running water and electricity, so I found the kettle I took from home and made a cup of tea. I moved my stuff in and ordered a pizza. I picked up my old phone and switched it on. The service had been terminated. I smiled to myself knowing that Kathy was now without a phone too, and that should give the girls some breathing space before I get to speak to them. I found my sleeping bag and arranged it out in the lounge and waited for dinner. I had some furniture arriving at the weekend, but for now, I was at least glad to be away from Kathy. I switched on my laptop and located the voice recordings I made in Ethan Cooper's office. I uploaded the content and played it back to hear the incriminating evidence of his infidelity with Chloe. I grabbed 2 USB sticks and made a couple of copies. I wrote the addresses of Margaret Cooper, wife of Ethan, and Peter Lewis, boyfriend of Chloe, and then placed a stick into each one. I would post them tomorrow before work. Finally, I decided to call my daughter Sophie to let her know the latest and not to let on to their mother where I was. To my surprise, she admitted that she hadn't even spoken to her mother yet. But of course, I guess she had no phone to be able to do that. In the week that followed, I managed to get my flat furnished and wasted no time at work in contacting customers of Cooper Engineering and convincing them to switch to Sutton. They saw what we were offering and jumped ship very quickly. A couple decided to stay with Ethan, but the majority hated the guy but tolerated him because of the superior products we offered. I knew it wouldn't take long for Ethan to find out why his business was losing customers, but I really did not care. I also knew that with all the utilities now cut off at my old home, Kathy would realize I was not coming back. There is no way she could afford the bills, so I knew it was safe for Noah to start the sales process. Megan delighted in being the one to get the ball rolling, and by the end of the week the signs were up. It was at this time I was contacted by Ava. Apparently Kathy had moved into her parents' house, and they were not happy that their little princess was a cheat. Kathy was after my blood, of course, and livid by what I had done to her. Strangely, I found that hugely satisfying, but knew this was not the end to it. By the weekend, I was invited to another dinner party in Noah and Megan's house. The dinner was a complete success, and I found myself completely relaxed for the first time since I planned to escape Kathy. Sunday morning brought good news. After only a week on the market, I had received 2 serious offers. I accepted one for £550,000 straight away. I knew it could be some time before it completed, but I made arrangements for the money once it was finalized. I would set up ISAs in the girls' names, and then ask Noah to spread the rest amongst numerous investment funds. I would also pay him back and take a chunk in cash to keep in my home safe. I still felt the need to protect myself. As another week passed, I was delighted to find out from Noah that the sale could be very quick. I contacted a removal company and instructed them to empty my old house. The girls called their mother and asked her if she wanted anything, and she was now even angrier and threatening. I promised the girls that it would soon all be over. On Tuesday morning, I was talking to one of our new clients who had been in a meeting with Ethan Cooper over a possible renewal of a supply contract. He had told Ethan that he would be moving to Sutton Engineering, and Ethan was not surprised. He had found out that Cooper Engineering had to cut 50% of its staff due to loss of work. He also informed me that Mrs. Cooper was divorcing Ethan for adultery. I had absolutely no sympathy as I was totaling up the commission checks in my head whilst talking. I had no idea what happened to Chloe and her boyfriend, but I knew he had got my gift if Mrs. Cooper had received hers, and even if he hadn't, I am sure it was well known why Mrs. Cooper was divorcing her husband. I wonder what her friends and family would think of her cheating with an old man. To reward me for all the new work, I was given a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. I was thinking of treating myself anyway, but Robert and the bosses were so pleased with me and the way the company was headed that I was given the car and a fair few thousand in commission. Well, it was actually more than £30,000. I was looking out of the window of my office, admiring my brand new car, when a familiar-looking Ford Focus pulled into the car park. I froze as I realized who it belonged to. It was Diane's car, Kathy's mom. I sat down at my chair and waited for the inevitable call. The bitch finally found me. My office phone began to ring and I picked up. "Mr. Collins, there's a woman here in reception claiming to be your wife, Freya," my secretary said. "Tell her I'm in a meeting and I'll be down in an hour." 3 hours later, and I peered out the window and she was still sat there. I exhaled loudly and decided to leave for the night. If she saw me, then I would have to deal with it. If not, I would just drive on past. It was not like she knew what car to look out for. I left through a side door and made my way to my car. I was just getting into my car when I heard a screech of tires, and before I knew it, there she was pulling up behind the car and blocking me in. She leapt out of the car and stormed up to me with a face like thunder. She looked like hell, and her clothes were obviously her sister's old ones, and it looked like her hair hadn't been brushed in weeks. "You scumsucker!" she screamed as she threw a slap in my direction and missed. She was furious. She wanted my blood. I told her to calm down and step in the car with me. She stepped in and was surprised to see the new car. She stated that she is broke and wants me to be back. I told her that since I cannot satisfy her and I do not measure up to her young studs, there was no need for me in her life. She then stated, "Please come home, Ben. Can we put all this behind us? I forgive you." What did she just say? Were my ears deceiving me? "You forgive me?" I asked, hoping I misheard. "Yes, Ben. I will forgive you for destroying my belongings and my life." "Are you delusional, Kathy?" I asked. She just looked at me like I was the crazy one. "You openly cheat on me and disrespect me when I give you everything, and you have the audacity to say you forgive me. But I thought..." "No, Kathy, you only think about yourself. I will never be with you again, so go away and be with one of your lovers," I said coldly. She then stated, "My friends treat me differently now we are separated, and their husbands have started to question their fidelity, meaning I have been kicked to the curb. I could be a bad influence if you can believe that." The truth is, she was in part responsible for all the bad things that had befallen her. But I did have sympathy for her. She messed up and was paying the price, but how big was that price? She had a great life, and she ruined it through greed and disrespect. However, I knew I had to move on. "I have nothing left, Ben. I need you, and I want you back in my life. I have no money and no job. When will I get my share of the house?" There it was. "At no point have you told me you love me. You just need me, Kathy, but I do not need you. As for the house, I defaulted on the mortgage and lost it," I lied. Her eyes widened and her jaw dropped. She was shocked by what I had said, but at least I knew what this visit was all about. "I want a divorce," I said. "No, please, Ben. Of course I love you. Over 20 years together, and I made a little mistake, and you burned me down. A very big, unforgivable mistake, Kathy, and I will never come home to you. Please, Ben," she screamed, her cries echoing through the car. "I want a clean break, and if you agree to it, I will give you £30,000 in cash," I offered. I saw her face change, and a new resolve replaced the tears. "You know," she yelled, "I will fight you in court for everything. There is no way you lost the house. You were too smart for that." Shit. She was right, and now she had me on the back foot. "Okay, Kathy. I'll put it this way," I started. You will never get a penny out of me. She moved her hips round and fronted up to me. I'll fight you for everything and more, Ben. You have no money, Kathy, and I will move my assets around so much you will spend a fortune trying to track down the money. I'm smart, remember, so by the time your solicitor finds it, you would have racked up a bill that would wipe out any gain. I suggest you take the money I'm offering, or I funnel that away too. Your call, I said sternly and never letting my eyes leave hers. You a-hole. I loved you and gave you children, and this is how you treat me? She said angrily. Thanks to me, our girls will go far. They won't be liars or cheats, and they will be selfless and not selfish like their mother. So take the money and get out of my life. My anger was beginning to come to the surface, and she looked at me as though I was a stranger. Okay, she spat. I'll take the money and agree to the divorce. Good. I'll get it arranged. With that, she got out of my car and slammed the door shut. Seconds later, she sped away and out of the car park. The following day, I filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and a week later, I arranged to meet Kathy at the girl's flat. The sale of my house had gone through, but I held off investing it until the papers were signed. We attempted to be civil in front of the girls, but it was a struggle. I handed Kathy the cash, and she signed the papers. I kissed the girls goodbye and wished Kathy good luck. As I was about to leave, she just burst into tears again, but I got the feeling they were just for the girls' benefit. Sophie and Ava looked at me and raised their eyebrows. They knew. See you next weekend, Dad, Ava said as I walked to the door. I walked back into the room as Kathy continued sobbing and nobody paying any attention to her. I suddenly realized what Ava was talking about. Oh yeah, the Coldplay gig. Everyone is looking forward to it. Will we be meeting you guys in London, or shall we travel together? Sophie asked. I'll speak to Amy and let you know in the week, I said finally before leaving. As I walked out the door, I heard Kathy shouting something, but I chose to ignore it and left. Until next time. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.